Thinking, Fast and Slow. Daniel Kahneman. Summarized by goldreaders.com. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Introduction. There is an intriguing psychological dynamic at play within our minds, resembling a captivating story with two central characters. These characters, known as System 1 and System 2, govern our behavior through their distinct modes of operation, one automatic and intuitive, the other deliberate and thoughtful. Their interplay influences our thinking, decision-making, and actions. System 1 represents the spontaneous and instinctive aspects of our brain, often operating without conscious control. It becomes evident when we react swiftly and involuntarily to sudden and loud sounds, redirecting our attention towards them. This system stems from our evolutionary heritage, as there are inherent benefits to promptly assess and respond to potential threats. On the other hand, System 2 corresponds to the conscious, reasoning part of our brain that facilitates individual decision-making, logical thinking, and the formation of beliefs. When we consciously focus on a specific task, like searching for a particular person in a crowd, System 2 engages. It helps filter out distractions and directs our attention towards relevant characteristics or cues that aid in locating the target. Maintaining focused attention enhances our chances of finding the person quickly, while distractions and loss of focus impede the search. The relationship between these two systems plays a crucial role in shaping our behavior, as we will explore in the following chapters. Chapter 1. How two systems shape our behavior. The phenomenon of laziness can have a significant impact on our cognitive abilities and lead to errors, as demonstrated by the following bat and ball problem. Consider this famous puzzle. A bat and a ball together cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. Now, take a moment to reflect on the actual cost of the ball. Chances are, your initial intuition led you to answer 10 cents, which is incorrect. If you revisit the problem and do the math, you'll realize that the correct answer is 5 cents. What occurred here was that your impulsive and automatic System 1 took over and swiftly responded based on intuition. However, it acted too quickly. Typically, when faced with a complex situation, System 1 would call upon System 2, the deliberate and analytical aspect of our mind, to solve the problem. However, in the case of the bat and ball problem, System 1 is deceived. It perceives the problem as simpler than it actually is and falsely assumes it can handle it independently. This predicament exposes a fundamental trait of our minds: innate mental laziness. Our brain tends to operate with minimal effort, following the principle of least exertion. Since consulting System 2 to verify the answer requires more energy, our mind often opts out when System 1 appears sufficient. This inclination toward laziness is unfortunate because engaging System 2 is a crucial aspect of our intelligence. Research indicates that practicing System 2 tasks, such as concentration and self-control, contributes to higher intelligence scores. The bat and ball problem serves as an illustration, highlighting how our minds could have avoided this common error by employing System 2 to double-check the answer. By succumbing to laziness and avoiding the utilization of System 2, our minds undermine the full potential of our intelligence. Chapter 2. Unconscious priming and behavior. Have you ever wondered why certain words or concepts seem to trigger specific associations in your mind? The phenomenon known as priming sheds light on this intriguing process. Let's explore how priming influences both our thoughts and actions, revealing that we are not always in conscious control of our mental processes. Consider the word fragment SO_P. Without any context, it may not evoke any particular meaning or response. However, if we first introduce the word eat before presenting SO_P again, you are likely to complete it as soup. This automatic association is an example of priming at work. Priming occurs when exposure to a word, concept, or event prompts our mind to summon related words and concepts. In the aforementioned example, the word eat primes our brain to anticipate food-related terms, leading us to complete SO_P as soup. Similarly, if the word shower were introduced instead, the association would likely be soap. Priming not only affects our thought processes but also influences our actions. Just as specific words or concepts impact our thinking, they can also affect our physical behavior. An intriguing study demonstrated this connection by priming participants with words associated with old age, such as Florida and wrinkle. Surprisingly, the participants responded by walking at a slower pace than usual, showcasing the unconscious influence of priming on bodily actions. The crucial insight offered by priming is that we are not always consciously in control of our actions, judgments, and choices. Rather, we are constantly being primed by various social and cultural conditions, shaping our behavior without our awareness. For instance, research conducted by Kathleen Voss has revealed the priming effect of money on individualistic behavior. Individuals exposed to the concept of money, such as through images or reminders, tend to act more independently and exhibit reduced willingness to depend on or comply with the demands of others. This suggests that living in a society abundant with money-related triggers could potentially steer our behavior away from altruism. Priming, among other societal influences, has a significant impact on our thoughts, choices, judgments, and overall behavior. These individual responses, in turn, reverberate within the culture, shaping the kind of society in which we all live. The understanding of priming and its unconscious influence serves as a reminder that our thoughts and actions are not solely products of conscious deliberation. Instead, they are deeply intertwined with the broader social and cultural context in which we exist. By unraveling the mysteries of our autopilot minds, we gain valuable insights into the complex interplay between our conscious and unconscious selves, paving the way for a deeper understanding of human behavior and societal dynamics. Chapter 3. Snap Judgments. In social situations, our minds often resort to snap judgments, making rapid decisions even when lacking sufficient information for a rational conclusion. Consider a scenario where you meet a person named Ben at a social gathering and find him easy to converse with. Later, when asked to recommend someone for a charitable contribution, you immediately think of Ben, despite having minimal knowledge about him. In essence, you have formed a positive impression of Ben based on a single aspect of his character and extrapolated it to his overall persona. We frequently form opinions about individuals even when we possess limited information about them. The mind's inclination to oversimplify matters without adequate data often leads to judgmental errors. This psychological phenomenon is known as the halo effect or exaggerated emotional coherence. Your positive feelings towards Ben's approachability create a halo effect, even though you lack substantial knowledge about him. However, this is not the sole cognitive shortcut our minds employ when making judgments. Confirmation bias also comes into play, where individuals tend to agree with information that aligns with their pre-existing beliefs and readily accept suggested information. This tendency can be demonstrated by posing the question, "Is James friendly?" Research indicates that when faced with this question without any additional information, we are highly likely to perceive James as friendly, as our minds automatically validate the suggested notion. Both the halo effect and confirmation bias arise from our mind's inclination to make swift judgments. Unfortunately, this often leads to errors due to insufficient data for an accurate assessment. Our minds rely on false suggestions and oversimplifications to fill the gaps in information, potentially leading to incorrect conclusions. These cognitive phenomena, such as priming, occur unconsciously and significantly influence our choices, judgments, and actions. Chapter 4. Mental shortcuts. In various situations, we often encounter the need to make rapid judgments. To facilitate this process, our minds have developed shortcuts known as heuristics. These mental strategies allow us to quickly grasp and comprehend our surroundings. While heuristics generally serve us well, the problem arises when we rely on them excessively. Using heuristics in situations where they are not suitable can lead to errors and mistakes. To gain a deeper understanding of heuristics and the errors they can cause, let's explore two types: the substitution heuristic and the availability heuristic. The substitution heuristic occurs when we answer a simpler question instead of the actual one presented to us. For instance, consider the question, "Will this woman be successful as a sheriff, given her candidacy?" Instead of thoroughly researching her background and policies, we unconsciously substitute it with an easier question: "Does this woman match our preconceived notion of a good sheriff?" This heuristic causes us to rely on our mental image rather than objective evaluation. Consequently, we might reject a highly qualified candidate if she doesn't fit our preconceived notion, disregarding her extensive experience in fighting crime. Another common heuristic is the availability heuristic, where we tend to overestimate the likelihood of events that are frequently heard or easily remembered. For instance, although strokes cause more deaths than accidents, a study revealed that 80% of respondents considered accidental deaths as more probable. This bias occurs because accidental deaths are more prevalent in media coverage and leave a stronger impression on us. Consequently, we may inappropriately prioritize and react to these perceived risks while underestimating the dangers of strokes. Chapter 5. Statistical blind spots. How can we accurately predict the likelihood of certain events? One effective method is to consider the base rate, which serves as a statistical foundation for other relevant statistics. For instance, let's consider a taxi company with 20% yellow cabs and 80% red cabs. By knowing these base rates, we can make reasonably accurate predictions about the color of a cab when we order one. Ideally, we should always factor in the base rate when making predictions, but unfortunately, base rate neglect is a widespread occurrence. One reason for this neglect is our tendency to focus on our expectations rather than what is statistically more probable. Consider the example of the cabs again. If we see 5 red cabs in a row, we might start to anticipate a yellow cab next, assuming it's more likely. However, regardless of the number of cabs of each color that pass by, the probability of the next cab being red remains around 80%, as long as we remember the base rate. Unfortunately, our focus on what we expect, such as a yellow cab, often leads us astray. Base rate neglect is just one manifestation of the broader problem we face when working with statistics. Another challenge is our struggle to grasp the concept of regression to the mean. This concept recognizes that all situations have an average status, and deviations from that average tend to revert back toward it over time. For instance, consider a football striker who typically scores an average of 5 goals per month. If she manages to score 10 goals in September, her coach might be thrilled. However, if she then returns to scoring around 5 goals per month for the rest of the year, her coach may criticize her for not maintaining her previous hot streak. In reality, the striker shouldn't face this criticism because she is simply regressing to the mean. Chapter 6. Past Imperfect. When it comes to remembering experiences, our minds don't follow a straightforward process. They consist of two distinct memory selves that recall situations in different ways. The first is the experiencing self, which captures our feelings in the present moment and asks, "How does it feel now?" The second is the remembering self, which reconstructs the entire event after it has occurred and asks, "How was it on the whole?" Although the experiencing self provides a more accurate account of what actually happened, as our feelings during an experience are the most reliable indicators, it is the remembering self that dominates our memory, even though it is less precise due to its retrospective nature. Two factors contribute to the dominance of the remembering self. The first is known as duration neglect, where we disregard the overall duration of an event in favor of a specific memory from it. The second factor is the peak-end rule, which leads us to place excessive emphasis on what transpires at the end of an event. To illustrate this dominance, consider an experiment involving people's recollection of a painful colonoscopy. Prior to the procedure, the participants were divided into two groups. One group underwent longer but less painful colonoscopies, while the other group had shorter procedures that escalated in pain toward the end. One might assume that the individuals enduring the lengthier process would be the most unhappy, given that their pain persisted for a longer period. This is indeed how they felt during the procedure, as their experiencing self accurately reflected their discomfort. However, after the experience, when the remembering self took over, it was the group that underwent the shorter procedure with a more painful ending that reported feeling the worst. This study exemplifies the phenomenon of duration neglect, the influence of the peak-end rule, and the fallibility of our memories. Our biased memories often overlook the objective reality of an experience and instead focus on selective aspects that stand out or leave a lasting impression. This can lead to discrepancies between how we felt in the moment and how we remember the event as a whole. Duration neglect occurs because our remembering self tends to prioritize specific moments or snapshots from an experience rather than considering the entire duration. For example, if a vacation had a few moments of discomfort or disappointment, our remembering self might overshadow the overall enjoyment and label the trip as unpleasant. Similarly, the peak-end rule influences our memory by placing disproportionate weight on the peak moments and the way an event concludes. Even if the majority of an experience was positive, a negative ending or a particularly intense peak moment can color our overall recollection. For instance, a fantastic concert might be remembered less favorably if it ended with a technical glitch or a disappointing encore. These biases in our memory recall have significant implications for how we perceive and evaluate our past experiences. Our remembering self shapes our retrospective judgments, influencing our future decisions and actions based on the distorted recollections of events. Chapter 7. From intuition to logic. The mind utilizes varying levels of energy depending on the task at hand. When little energy is required and attention is not a priority, we experience a state of cognitive ease. Conversely, when attention is demanded, more energy is expended, leading to a state of cognitive strain. These fluctuations in energy levels within the brain have profound effects on our behavior. During cognitive ease, our intuitive system 1 dominates our thinking while the logical and more energy-intensive system 2 takes a back seat. This results in heightened intuition, creativity, and happiness, but also increases the likelihood of errors. In contrast, cognitive strain heightens our awareness, placing System 2 in control. System 2 is more inclined to verify our judgments, reducing creativity but leading to fewer mistakes. You have the ability to consciously influence the mind's energy expenditure to align with specific tasks. For instance, if you aim to make a message more persuasive, you can promote cognitive ease. One method is exposing ourselves to repetitive information. When information is repeated or made more memorable, it becomes more persuasive. This is because our minds have evolved to respond positively when repeatedly exposed to clear and consistent messages. Familiarity triggers a state of cognitive ease. On the other hand, cognitive strain is beneficial for tackling statistical problems. To induce this state, we can expose ourselves to confusing information, such as using hard-to-read fonts. This prompts our minds to engage more actively and increase energy levels in order to comprehend the problem, making us less likely to give up easily. Chapter 8. Probability presentation shapes risk assessment. The manner in which probabilities are presented to us plays a crucial role in shaping our perception of risk. The way ideas are framed and problems are posed has a profound impact on our judgment and decision-making processes. A compelling illustration of this phenomenon can be observed when evaluating risk. One might assume that once the probability of a risk event is determined, individuals would approach it uniformly. However, this assumption does not hold true. Even when dealing with meticulously calculated probabilities, a mere alteration in how the information is conveyed can significantly influence our approach. For instance, when a rare event is expressed in terms of relative frequency rather than as a statistical probability, people tend to perceive it as more likely to occur. A notable experiment known as the Mr. Jones experiment provides insight into this concept. Two groups of psychiatric professionals were asked whether it was safe to discharge a patient named Mr. Jones from a psychiatric hospital. The first group was informed that patients similar to Mr. Jones had a 10% probability of committing an act of violence, while the second group was told that, out of every 100 patients similar to Mr. Jones, 10 are estimated to commit an act of violence. Interestingly, nearly twice as many respondents from the second group objected to his discharge. Another phenomenon that diverts our attention from statistically relevant information is known as denominator neglect. This occurs when we disregard plain statistics and instead prioritize vivid mental images that sway our decisions. Consider these two statements: this drug protects children from disease X but carries a 0.001% chance of permanent disfigurement, versus, out of 100,000 children who take this drug, one will be permanently disfigured. Although both statements convey the same information, the latter evokes a mental image of a disfigured child, exerting a more powerful influence and making us less inclined to administer the drug. Chapter 9. Beyond rational thinking. When it comes to decision-making, we, as individuals, do not solely rely on rational thinking. For a significant period, a group of economists held the view that our choices were driven entirely by logical reasoning. They proposed utility theory as the basis for decision-making, asserting that individuals consider only rational facts and select the option with the best overall outcome, maximizing their utility. To illustrate this concept, utility theory would suggest that if you prefer oranges over kiwis, you would also choose a 10% chance of winning an orange over a 10% chance of winning a kiwi. At first glance, this seems evident and logical. The leading proponents of this perspective were the economists associated with the Chicago School of Economics, most notably the renowned scholar Milton Friedman. Using utility theory, the Chicago School argued that individuals in the marketplace act as ultra-rational decision-makers, whom economist Richard Thaler and lawyer Cass Sunstein later referred to as econs. According to this view, econs approach their choices in the same rational manner, valuing goods and services based solely on their rational needs. Moreover, econs evaluate their wealth rationally, considering only the utility it provides them. Now, let's imagine two individuals named John and Jenny, each possessing fortunes of $5 million. According to utility theory, they should have equal wealth, and thus, similar levels of contentment with their financial status. However, let's complicate the scenario a bit. Suppose their $5 million fortunes were the outcome of a day spent at a casino, but their initial circumstances differed significantly. John started with a mere $1 million and managed to multiply his money, whereas Jenny began with $9 million, which diminished to $5 million. Do you still believe John and Jenny would be equally satisfied with their $5 million? It is highly unlikely. This clearly indicates that there is more to how we assign value to things than pure utility. Chapter 10. Loss aversion syndrome. Why, rather than making decisions based solely on rational considerations, we are often swayed by emotional factors. If utility theory doesn't work, then what does? One alternative is prospect theory, developed by the author. Kahneman's prospect theory challenges utility theory by showing that when we make choices, we don't always act in the most rational way. Imagine these two scenarios. For example, in the first scenario, you're given $1,000 and then must choose between receiving a definite $500 or taking a 50% chance to win another $1,000. In the second scenario, you're given $2,000 and must then choose between a sure loss of $500 or taking a 50% chance on losing $1,000. If we made purely rational choices, then we would make the same choice in both cases. But this isn't the case. In the first instance, most people choose to take the sure bet, while in the second case, most people take a gamble. Prospect theory helps to explain why this is the case. It highlights at least two reasons why we don't always act rationally. Both of them feature our loss aversion, the fact that we fear losses more than we value gains. The first reason is that we value things based on reference points. Starting with $1,000 or $2,000 in the two scenarios changes whether we're willing to gamble, because the starting point affects how we value our position. The reference point in the first scenario is $1,000 and $2,000 in the second, which means ending up at $1,500 feels like a win in the first, but a distasteful loss in the second. Even though our reasoning here is clearly irrational, we understand value as much by our starting point as by the actual objective value at the time. Second, we're influenced by the diminishing sensitivity principle. The value we perceive may be different from its actual worth. For instance, going from $1,000 to $900 doesn't feel as bad as going from $200 to $100, despite the monetary value of both losses being equal. Similarly, in our example, the perceived value lost when going from $1,500 to $1,000 is greater than when going from $2,000 to $1,500. Chapter 11. Illusions of certainty. Our minds possess a natural inclination to construct comprehensive mental images in order to comprehend the world around us. This cognitive coherence aids us in explaining ideas and concepts. For instance, when contemplating the weather, we have various mental images, such as a vibrant sun radiating intense heat, that help us visualize and understand different seasons. These mental images also play a significant role in our decision-making process. When faced with choices, we often rely on these images to form assumptions and draw conclusions. For instance, when deciding what attire to don in the summertime, we base our decisions on our mental image of that season's weather. However, a critical issue arises when we place excessive confidence in these mental images. Even when statistical data and available evidence contradict our mental representations, we still allow these images to guide us. For instance, despite a weather forecaster predicting cooler temperatures for the summer, you might venture outside in shorts and a t-shirt because your mental image of summer persuades you to do so. Consequently, you may find yourself shivering in the cold. In essence, we tend to exhibit a significant degree of overconfidence in our often flawed mental images. Nonetheless, there are strategies to overcome this overconfidence and improve our predictive abilities. One approach to avoiding errors is through reference class forecasting. Rather than relying solely on broad mental images, this method encourages us to employ specific historical examples to make more accurate forecasts. For example, recalling a previous occasion when you experienced a chilly summer day can inform your clothing choice for similar circumstances. Additionally, implementing a long-term risk policy can help us plan specific measures in both successful and failed forecasting scenarios. By preparing and safeguarding ourselves, we can rely on evidence rather than generalized mental images, leading to more precise forecasts. In the context of our weather example, this might involve carrying a sweater as a precautionary measure. Conclusion. Thinking, fast and slow, elucidates the existence of two systems within our minds. The first system operates instinctively, demanding minimal effort, while the second system functions in a more deliberate manner, requiring substantial attention. Our thoughts and actions vary based on which system is in control of our brain at any given time. Practical advice. Reinforce the message. Repeated exposure to messages enhances their persuasive impact. This effect likely stems from our evolutionary development, as repeated exposure to harmless things tends to be perceived as beneficial. Do not be swayed by infrequent statistical events that receive excessive media coverage. Disasters and other incidents hold significance in our history, but we often overestimate their statistical likelihood due to the vivid images associated with them through media portrayal. Enhance your creativity and intuition by fostering a positive mood. A positive mood tends to relax the analytical and alert aspect of our minds, thereby relinquishing control to the more intuitive and faster thinking system. This state of mind fosters enhanced creativity as well.